Well, there's a chapter 48 in the 48 Laws of Power called Assume Formlessness. And that's obviously a similar chapter to this, which is all about how you handle chaos in life. And that's a big theme of mine, because I think life is essentially disorderly. You can't predict what happens next. And how you manage that is a very critical factor in life. And I have found in all of my studies of successful people in any endeavor that they have a much higher capacity for handling chaos and handling fluid situations than other people. They're able to adapt to them. This is a critical quality in a general, for instance. And what Napoleon Bonaparte did is probably the greatest innovation in military history, which was basically he managed to find a way to use chaos on the battlefield to his advantage. And so what I've done here in this book is that it's a similar concept, but I'm attaching it to fear, which I obviously didn't do in the 48 Laws, because this is a book about overcoming fear and the power it will bring you, which 50 and I are saying makes this sort of the ultimate law of power. And so underneath the idea of people who can't accept chaos is fear. We're basically animals that really are addicted to familiarity. Something unknown or different or unusual causes us to freak out in life, and we want everything to conform to certain patterns that we have already sort of devised in our minds, and life isn't like that. Take, for instance, piracy in the music business. I think is sort of the paradigm I can show you right here. The music business went through this incredible change in the early part of this decade, where they were seeing that their principal source of income was dying up, which is the sales of CDs. That's what their whole business was based on. And all of the money was funneled towards the few artists who made these mega amounts of money for them on CD sales. Because CDs are relatively inexpensive to produce, the amount of money you can make was quite amazing. And here that whole model was dissolving before them with the whole era of Napster and after that, where half of their sales were going away, and now even more than half. And what did they do? They completely freaked out about this, and they decided to do whatever they could to end this piracy. And instead of adapting to it or thinking of new ways that they could base their business model on, new sources of revenue, they thought of the only thing was to protect the old way. And here's 50 comes on the scene, and he sees the chaos and sees what's happening. He enters the picture in 2003 in the middle of this phenomenon. And he says, as a hustler, as somebody who understands change going on in the world, I'm not going to get all rigid and think about how I can somehow still squash this piracy and make money on CD sales. I'm going to find alternate sources of revenue. And in fact, my presence on the stage as an entertainer is simply a way to attract people to my business. So I'm not going to make any money from CDs, or if it's just a number. And of course, if I sell more than Kanye West, it means something. But the money that it generates doesn't mean anything, because I'm going to generate money from other things. So he was extremely fluid in how he handled this changing situation. And in a sense, he was one of the forerunners of figuring out a new model for how to make money in the music industry. And I look at other people in history. And in the book we talked about Mao Zedong, who was one of the icons of the Law 48, Assume Formlessness. But if you look at it, it's very similar. China in the 1920s was going through a very revolutionary moment. A culture that had been the same for thousands of years was suddenly going through these massive upheavals. And you had the Communist Party, which probably represented the party of the most kind of dynamic change in this ancient culture. And they were just simply going to import the Russian way of fighting to China, because the Soviets had the previous successful communist revolution. It was absurd. It had nothing to do with China. And Mao comes in and he says, what we need to do is we need to unleash the giantness of China, the chaos of it, and use the peasantry and use the vast size of the country and create a free-flowing army and initiate a new form of guerrilla warfare. That incredible mental fluidity is what fascinates me. And I think underneath people who can't succeed in life is our rigid ways of thinking. And it's all based on fear. If you're not afraid of new ideas, if you're not afraid of completely letting go of what you thought was the right thing yesterday and adapting to what's happening today, I think you're going to be successful. And so that's the wrinkle that I give here.